Hello again, Ruby, Sigrid and Agnes. Well, today something very exciting is going to happen in this chapter of Millie Molly Mandy, because Millie Molly Mandy has decided to give a party. Once upon a time, Millie Molly Mandy decided she had a plan. And when she thought over the plan for a while, she went to look for her money box. In the money box were 4 pennies and a halfpenny, which Millie Molly Mandy did not think would be good enough for her plan. So Millie Molly Mandy went off to talk it over with Susan just down the road. Susan, said Millie Molly Mandy, I've got a plan. Well, it's actually a great secret. I want to give a party in our barn next to our white house for father and mother, grandad and grandma, and uncle and auntie. And I want to buy some refreshments. And you and I can be the waitresses. And if there's anything over, we can eat it up afterwards. Susan thought this was a very good plan indeed. Will we wear caps? She asked. Yes, said Millie Molly Mandy, and aprons. Only I haven't got enough money yet for the refreshments, so I don't think there'll be any over. We're going to have a good think. So Millie Molly Mandy and Susan sat down and thought very hard. Millie Molly Mandy said, we must do some work and earn some money. But how? Asked Susan. We might sell some things, said Millie Molly Mandy. But what? Said Susan. So they had to think a little bit more. Presently, Millie Molly Mandy said, I've got pansies and marigolds in my garden. And Susan said, I've got some nasturtiums in mine. We could run errands for people, said Millie Molly Mandy. And clean brass objects, said Susan. That was a lovely idea. So Millie Molly Mandy fetched a pencil and paper and wrote out very carefully in her best handwriting, Millicent, Margaret, Amanda and Susan and Co. have bunches of flowers for sale and clean brass very cheap. And in brackets, we do not spill the polish. And run errands very cheap. What's and Co? Said Susan. It's just business, said Millie Molly Mandy. But perhaps we might ask Billy Blunt to be it. And he could also be a waiter. Then they hung the notice on the front gate and waited just either side of the hedge. Several people passed, but nobody seemed to want anything. Then at last a motor car came along with a lady and a gentleman in it. And when they saw the nice white cottage where Millie Molly Mandy lived, they stopped at the gate to ask if they could get some cream there. Millie Molly Mandy said, I'll go and ask Mother. And she took the little pot they held out. And when she came back with it full of cream, the lady and gentleman had read the notice and were asking Susan questions. As the lady paid for the cream, she said they must certainly buy some flowers. So they each bought a bunch of pansies and marigolds and nasturtiums. And then the gentleman said the round brass thing in front of his car needed cleaning very badly. Could the firm do it straight away? So Millie Molly Mandy said, yes, sir, we certainly can, and raced back into the cottage to give Mother the cream money and to borrow the brass polishing box. And then she cleaned the round brass thing in front of the car with one piece of cloth, and Susan rubbed it bright with another piece of cloth. And the lady and gentleman looked on and seemed very satisfied. Then the gentleman asked, how much? And paid them 2 pence for the flowers and a penny for the polishing. Millie Molly Mandy wanted to do some more polishing for the money, but the gentleman said they couldn't stop. Then they said goodbye and went off, and the lady turned and waved, and Millie Molly Mandy and her friend Susan waved back till they'd gone. Millie Molly Mandy and Susan were very happy because they now had 7 pence and a halfpenny for the refreshments. Father and mother, Grandad and Grandma, Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs, Susan's mother, made 7. Then who should look over the hedge but Mr. Jakes the postman, on his way home from collecting letters from the letterboxes. He'd seen the notice on the gate as well. "What's this?" he said. "You trying to make a fortune?" "Well, yes," said Milly Molly Mandy, "but we've only earned 3 pence so far." "Well," said the postman, "what do you plan to do with it?" "We've got a secret," said Milly Molly Mandy. "Ah," said the postman, "I guess it's a nice secret too." Milly Molly Mandy looked at Susan and then she looked at the postman. He was a very nice postman. And she said, "You won't tell if we tell you, will you?" "Try me," said the postman promptly. So Milly Molly Mandy told him they were planning to give a party to Father and Mother, Grandma and Grandad, Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs. "They're lucky people, aren't they?" said the postman. "Nobody ever asked me to parties." Milly Molly Mandy looked at Susan again. And then she looked at the postman, who was a very nice postman. And then she said, "Well, if you were invited, would you come?" "You try me," said the postman promptly again. And then he hitched up his letter bag and went on his way. Father and Mother, Grandma and Grandad, Uncle and Auntie, Mrs. Moggs and the postman. "Oh no, we've got to earn some more money," said Milly Molly Mandy. "Let's go down to the village and ask Billy Blunt to be and co, and perhaps he'll have an idea too." Billy Blunt was in the road outside the corn shop, mending the handles of his box on wheels. He had made it nearly all himself, and it was a very nice one, painted green like the water butt and the lawn roller, if you remember from the chapter on gardening. He thought and co was a rather funny name, but he said it would be all right and offered to make them a box with a slit in it where they could keep their earnings. And he put in 4 farthings out of his collection. Billy Blunt collected farthings and he had 19 in an empty birdseed bag. So now they had 8 pence and a halfpenny for the refreshments. On Monday morning, on their way home to dinner, Milly Molly Mandy and Susan passed Mrs. Jakes, the postman's wife, at her door, getting a breath of fresh air before dishing up her dinner. And Mrs. Jakes said, "Good morning, how's the firm of Millicent, Margaret, Amanda, Susan and Co getting on?" Milly Molly Mandy said, "Very well, thank you." "My husband's told me about your brass cleaning," said Mrs. Jakes. "I've got a whole mantel shelf full that wants doing." Milly Molly Mandy and Susan were very pleased and arranged to come straight after school and clean it. And they cleaned a mug, 3 candlesticks, 2 lamps, and a tray and a warming pan, and they didn't spill or waste any of the polish. Mrs. Jakes seems very satisfied, excuse me, Grandma, and gave them each a penny and a piece of cake. So now they had 10 pence and a halfpenny for refreshments. But when they got outside, Milly Molly Mandy said, "Father and Mother, Grandma and Grandad, Uncle and Auntie and Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman. I wonder if we've got enough, Susan." As they turned home, they passed the forge, and of course they had to stop at the doorway as usual to watch the fire roaring and Mr. Rudge, the blacksmith, banging away with his hammer on the anvil. Susan was a little bit nervous of the blacksmith. He was so big and his face was so dirty it made his teeth look very white in his mouth. But his eyes were very twinkly when he smiled. Milly Molly Mandy knew he was nice and clean under all the dirt, and so she smiled back. And the blacksmith said, "Hello," and Milly Molly Mandy said, "Hello." Then the blacksmith beckoned them in with his finger and said, "Come in." Milly Molly Mandy ran in, and the blacksmith said, "Look what I've got here." And he showed them a tiny little horseshoe, just like a proper one for a horse or a pony, only a lot smaller. And he'd made it specially for them to keep. Milly Molly Mandy thanked him very much, and they Then she looked at the blacksmith and said, "Would you come if you were invited to a party?" And the blacksmith looked at Milly Molly Mandy with his twinkly eyes and said he'd come quite fast, as long as he wasn't before 5 o'clock on a Saturday when he was playing cricket with his team in the meadow. When they got outside again, Milly Molly Mandy said, "Father, mother, grandad, grandma, uncle, auntie, Mrs. Moggs, the postman and Mrs. Postman, and the blacksmith. Oh gosh, that's 10 people. We'll have to ask them for 5:30, and we ought to earn some more money, Susan." Just then they met Billy Blunt coming along, pulling his box on wheels with a bundle in it. He grinned and said, "I'm fetching Mrs. Bloss's washing for the firm." Milly Molly Mandy and Susan were pleased. When Saturday morning came, all the invitations had been given out, and the firm of Millicent, Margaret, Amanda, Susan and Co. was very busy putting things tidy in the barn and covering up things which couldn't be moved with lots of green branches which Grandpa was trimming from the hedges. And when 5:30 came, Milly Molly Mandy and Susan, with clean hands and paper caps and aprons, waited by the barn door to welcome the guests. And each gentleman received a little marigold buttonhole and each lady a pansy. Everybody arrived in good time, except for the blacksmith, who was just a little bit late. He looked so clean and pink in his white cricket flannels, instead of his usual clothes. Milly Molly Mandy hardly knew him. But Billy Blunt came lugging a gramophone and 2 records, which he had borrowed from a bigger boy at school. Then Billy Blunt, who didn't want to dance, looked after the gramophone, while father and mother, grandad and grandma, uncle and auntie, Mrs. Moggs and the postman and Mrs. Postman, and the blacksmith, and Milly Molly Mandy and Susan danced together in the old barn till the darkness started to fall. And Milly Molly Mandy danced a lot with the blacksmith as well as with everybody else. They really enjoyed themselves. And then they had refreshments. Raspberry drops and aniseed balls on saucers trimmed with little flowers, and late blackberries on leaf plates, and sherbet drinks with Billy Blunt prepared, while Milly Molly Mandy and Susan stood by to tell people just at the very moment to drink when it was fizzing properly. And the jelly, which Milly Molly Mandy and Susan had made themselves, only it had to be eaten a little bit like soup because it stood up properly. Father and mother, grandma and grandad, uncle and auntie, Mrs. Moggs, the postman and Mrs. Postman, and the blacksmith all said they'd never enjoyed a jelly so much, even though it was a bit sloppy. And the blacksmith in a big voice proposed a vote of thanks to the firm for the delightful party and refreshments, and everybody else said "Hear, hear" and clapped. Milly Molly Mandy and Susan joined in the clapping too. And then all the guests went home. And when the firm came to clear up the refreshments, they found that there was only 1 aniseed ball left. Oh dear. But placed alongside the empty saucers and glasses on the bench was a small basket of pears and a bag of mixed sweets with a sign on that said, "For the waiter and the waitresses." So they had something to eat after all. That's the end of that chapter. Milly Molly Mandy knows how to put on a good party, doesn't she? And tomorrow we'll be finding out about another special event in the life of Milly Molly Mandy. But you'll have to wait till then. Grandma will say bye and see you soon. Is that a long one? It seems